Welcome to this virtual learning opportunity presented by the Institute for Research and Reform in Education. This session is one of a series aimed at thinking with educators about growing toward executive use with 12 evidence-based instructional strategies. In this session, we'll explore a strategy aimed at leveraging children's natural desires to talk into a productive academic conversation. Today, we'll focus on peer conversations. After completing all learning activities in this module, you'll be able to describe peer conversations as an instructional strategy, design and execute well-structured peer conversations, and develop a rationale for employing peer conversations. The learning activities involved in this module are watching this video and responding to the embedded prompts, reviewing and responding to supporting documentation that accompanies this video, submitting a planning document and video evidence documenting the use of the strategy, receiving feedback from IRRE instructional specialists, and submitting a final planning document and video evidence of the use of the strategy to demonstrate mastery of peer conversations. Peer conversations closely follow the pattern established in our previous session, varied levels of interaction. While varied levels of interaction represents a principle that underlies peer conversations in and of themselves are nuanced events deserving of their own attention and planning. These elements are embedded throughout peer conversations: student-to-self time, student-to-student time, and student-to-class time. Let's explore how we might design a peer conversation using those principles. Before the lesson begins, we need to think about three key questions. First, when will the peer conversation occur? Will this be a simple oral check for understanding in the middle of a lecture, a brainstorming session before a project, a vehicle to prompt thinking before an exit ticket, or some other option? Second, what questions will students discuss with their peers? Remember the key elements of quality questions. The questions we ask them to explore should be open-ended, inviting, and have multiple possible responses, so as to ensure a rich variety of ideas. Third, what structure will the conversation take? Consider the size of group of students that will be engaging in the conversation, how much time each person will have to speak, how the speakers will be ordered, how students will be held accountable for their work together, and how responses will be inspected. While checks for understanding and quality questioning are addressed in other professional learning opportunities, the art of designing a structure for the peer conversation is formally addressed in this segment. As discussed previously, there are 5 chief considerations: group size, time allotted, ordering of speakers, student accountability, and inspection of responses. Let's explore a planning template to help make visible the thinking behind planning a peer conversation. As we discuss each element of the planning, a number of options for each element will also be discussed. Our first consideration is designing a grouping scheme for each conversation. To do so, we must decide how many students will be part of each group. As a rule, this should not exceed 4 students. As additional students are added, it becomes less likely that each student will be able to share and test their thinking adequately. In thinking about grouping, we must also decide how students will be arranged in groups. Perhaps groups are pre-selected by the instructor to create heterogeneous or homogeneous groups. A less structured grouping may ask students to turn to someone nearby. And even further still, students might be given the opportunity to form groups of their own choosing. In any case, the teacher must be explicit in communicating these decisions to students prior to the conversation. An area to record your thinking is provided. Please feel free to use examples from this presentation, examples from the supplementary materials, or your own thinking to help complete the frame. We will be adding to this frame throughout the presentation in order to help develop a clear set of expectations for your upcoming peer conversation. With our grouping established, we next need to address some procedural concerns. How long will each speaker have to share their thoughts? How will students determine who speaks first or next? In terms of time, shorter periods, for example around 30 seconds, are appropriate for younger learners or classes who are new to peer conversations. As processing and conversational capabilities continue to develop, more time is allowed for these conversations. Providing a method for students to order speakers in their group accomplishes two things. It reduces the struggle that students sometimes face when taking initiative in group conversations, as well as communicates the expectation that all students will participate. These elements are often crucial to successful conversations. In many cases, teachers start the starter by identifying a safe attribute, for example, the person with the lightest shirt or the darkest shoes, to begin the conversation. They then direct students about how sharing should occur in groups of 3 to 4 students, for example, moving clockwise or counterclockwise. Together, these two considerations provide some of the structure for the peer conversation to take place. Next, we must think about student accountability in two dimensions. First, what will individual students be expected to produce as a result of this conversation? And second, what will groups of students be expected to produce as a result of this conversation? Planning for individual accountability is essential, as it provides an additional incentive for student participation. While individual students are often held accountable simply by sharing their work with a small group, many teachers ask that students create a written response prior to the small group conversation. The purpose is twofold. First, it helps students to organize their thoughts prior to sharing with the peer. Secondly, it provides a deliverable for the teacher to collect and inspect as they might desire. Small groups of students are also held accountable for a product. Often, this is simply a verbal sharing of their consensus pick for best or most interesting point raised by group members. Other times, a written response on a whiteboard or chart paper is asked for. Doing so is especially useful if students will be asked to refer to the thinking again in the future. After we have determined what students will be responsible for doing, we must then think about how we will inspect their work. Typically, such inspections are done orally or by observing or collecting the work product. In either case, we want to be sure that inspections allow us to consider the responses of at least 25% of our students. This allows us to obtain a representative sample of student thinking, informing our judgments about instructional next steps. After all these items have been considered, we can transition to thinking about the in-class execution of the peer conversation. Executing a peer conversation requires 4 steps. First, we must pose that quality question to the class, ensuring that it is open-ended and inviting. Second, we must indicate the structure in which the conversation will take place, posting visuals for student reference where possible and appropriate. These visual cues often help to remind students of next steps in the structure, which can help reduce off-task behavior. Third, we'll monitor peer conversations to ensure that they are on task and on target, and provide structural cues as appropriate. Finally, we'll inspect multiple responses as we decided earlier. As previously stated, once inspections are complete, the instructor has several choices to make. Do students demonstrate mastery in answering the question, signaling that they are ready to move on? Or does the depth and quality of their responses indicate that further instruction is necessary? In these ways, peer conversations can help facilitate the formative assessment process in the classroom. Before you begin your work on other learning activities for this module, let's spend a brief moment to reflect on the learning from this session. On the next slide, please respond to the prompts, click Submit, and then click Continue to move forward in the session. Thank you for participating in this valuable work. This video is the first of several learning activities intended to deepen your understanding of peer conversations. To further refine your understanding, we ask you to review and respond to the supporting documentation, which will help you with additional examples of peer conversations and different formats that you might explore. We'll ask you to complete the peer conversation planning document, and once that is completed, submit the planning document along with a video of you performing a peer conversation in your classroom. IRRE instructional specialists will review the video and provide you feedback within 3 business days. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you again.